In Five Nights at Freddy's 4, there is a minigame that takes place after the third night, the fourth minigame in the game, that shows a little bit of stuff via an Easter egg. These things answered a couple questions, but then they opened up a couple others, I think. So many people saw this Easter egg on the TV screen in the house after you walk all the way back from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and they see Fredbear and Friends 1983. What is that supposed to mean? Is that right now? Is this 1983? Is that a direct hint to what time it is? But this can't be. Everyone's saying this is the bite of 87, even though that's still arguably the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. However, in this minigame, we get a hint as to another thing that a lot of people have been asking questions about since the first game, which is, what is the identity of Fredbear? Is Fredbear and Freddy two separate entities? Are they different characters? And in this minigame, this Easter egg proves to us that they are. Because not only do we see Fredbear with his purple hat doing stuff with other animatronics, I think there's an image when they show him with Foxy, we also see Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy by himself, all individually colored and packaged on their own, showing that these two characters are indeed different. Fredbear is not a character that became Freddy. Golden Freddy is thusly not Freddy at all. But we also have another question that gets brought up in this minigame. Nowhere in this Easter egg do we see Spring Bonnie make an appearance. We see regular Bonnie, but at no point do we see Spring Bonnie. And this, I think, points out something that needed to have been answered a long time ago, which is Spring Bonnie and Bonnie the same character? We have our answer for Freddy and Fredbear, but in this instance, we have also gotten an answer for this one too. A lot of people probably didn't even think about how complicated this question's answer would have been, but I think right now I'll give you guys a little bit of insight as to what that question has for an answer. One thing that I feel like is deathly urgent to bring up is the fact that at no point in the entire series is Springtrap or Spring Bonnie ever referred to as Golden Bonnie, while at least in the custom mode for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Golden Freddy is referred to as Golden Freddy in the game. Now, a lot of people might not really think much about that, but I think that this actually proves that Bonnie and Spring Bonnie are actually the same character. Now, this isn't National Geographic or the Discovery Channel, but let me give you a little bit of animal science business. There's a such thing in nature called photoperiodism that causes color change in rabbits. Now, a lot of times what this means is that a rabbit that's a color that's, something that's used to blend in certain times of the year, usually around when it's cold so that they can stay safe in the winter, they transition from that color, whatever it may be, to a light brown, yellow color. Now, I don't know if this is like mind-blowing to anybody else, but this entire time, I think everyone's been hearing Spring Bonnie and thinking, wow, like the Springlock suit. But in reality, what this might well mean is that Spring Bonnie is literally what Bonnie looks like during the spring, after their fur has changed colors. Now, we don't know what time that this game takes place in, but we do know that in this, we don't actually see Spring Bonnie in the TV ad, that's the Easter egg, and we don't see regular Bonnie show up at all inside the pizzeria. Sure, we see Spring Bonnie and we see Fredbear, but we don't see regular Bonnie at all. Now, that could be because they are somewhere else and we just didn't go into the room in which they exist, but it could also mean that sometimes they swap between the two. The Springlock animatronics also double as animatronics, that's just how they work. So perhaps sometimes throughout the year, they switch out between Spring Bonnie and regular Bonnie. Or maybe they make it part of their gig. Maybe the whole seasons changing thing is a part of how everything works. They do have a lot of animals that live out in the woods. A lot of things that hibernate, a lot of things that might so change. Now, you might be asking, hey Steve, why is this important? Well, to an extent, I think this is very important because it starts to answer the question that we had in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Even though we saw Bonnie in the trailer, at no point did we see Bonnie show up as a phantom animatronic or anything outside of busted up parts inside of the shop. Why doesn't he show up as a phantom when literally every other character that showed up at least shows up once? I think this also leads into another statement that I think I need to make, which is that a lot of people throughout this entire series have been calling a lot of things hallucinations. Now, in some instances, like seeing letters and words and stuff appear in front of you, a lot of that stuff I do think are hallucinations. But in the instance of the Phantom animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, I am convinced without any doubt that these things are not hallucinations at all. What they are is something straight out of a horror film. Now, I'm sure you've at least seen one horror movie in your life that has ghosts in it. And I'm sure you understand at this point that this story, at least to an extent, is talking about ghosts. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we find out that the Purple Man, the killer who had killed the children throughout the history of this franchise, was gotten to his one-uppance. He was placed inside of a Spring Bonnie costume back in what we can assume is the 90s at some point. And through its vast level of deterioration, it clamps shut on him and kills him inside. However, after years of misuse and well, not misuse, but lack of, it hadn't been seen for decades, they unearthed this thing and put it inside of Fazbear's Fright. And this thing, unknown to everybody but you, the night guard at this new horror attraction, this thing here is out to get you. Now, I don't want to sound like somebody who's very skeptical of this, but I'm not convinced that a robotic suit could function on its own entirely after 30 years of being inside of a wet, dank room that shouldn't even be known about. Which makes me think that part of the fact that it functions at all is because it is being possessed. Now, I've always thought it was kind of cool, the idea of somebody possessing their own dead body, but in this, it just kind of works, I think. This Purple Man, this vengeful spirit who's been here forever as, the killer, possesses this suit and tries to do something. That's one thing that's never explained. He tries to do something, and in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, you have to survive these nights while he is out to get you, trying to get into your room. How does he try to achieve this, you ask? Not by hallucinations, but instead by trying to distract the player by sending spectral projections of scary things into their room. And what would be scarier than all the animatronics that had been in these Freddy Fazbear pizzerias? These characters that had struck fear into some for decades, it seemed like. But ask yourself this question. What one thing do these characters that you see as phantoms all share? It's not the location that they showed up in the original games, because for one, the Foxy that shows up is based off of the design from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which takes place earlier than the first game. The Chica is based off the design from Five Nights at Freddy's 1, basically an exact model rep with just some burned skin effects on it. The Freddy model seems to be almost an exact replica of the Golden Freddy model, so a lot of these characters have not been seen at the same time in the same way at all, not by you as a player. Even the puppet shows up, something that did not show up at all in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And you, as a security guard at this horror attraction, have not seen any of these at all unless you were a child in one of these places, and even still, you hadn't seen them like that. But you know who has seen all these characters in these ways without all the burns on them? The Purple Guy. The Purple Guy has worked at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. He was the night guard during the summer, before you in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. He was the one who killed the 5 kids during that summer. He was there when Mangle was there. He was there when Foxy was in storage there. He was probably there in the previous establishment when all those characters still existed. And maybe to an extent, he was still there in the pizzeria in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. After which, he disassembles all 4 of the animatronics that he knows were possessed by the children that he killed, just to be one-upped by them and placed inside of a suit in which he would be trapped for the rest of his life. Or death, I guess. And with that, he sends the images, these spectral ghouls, towards you. These ideas, these characters that he's seen before, he's sending them with his intent towards you to distract you so that you cannot prevent him from getting inside of the room so that he can finally actually get you with his own 2 hands. All the characters but one. And that is because that character has never been missing. The reason we don't see Bonnie at all in the game as a spectral fiend, as a character to come after you and mess you up, is simply because they were already here. Freddy is there as a phantom. Foxy is there as a phantom. Chica is there as a phantom. Even the puppet that set all these things into motion was seen by the purple guy and made into a phantom. But the character people thought was missing was never missing, because the purple guy is Bonnie, because Bonnie is Spring Bonnie, because those characters are the same character. And by the virtue of him being Bonnie, he knows that there won't be any other Bonnie that could scare you away from the door more so than him. The minute he shows up in that glass in front of you, you know that you've seen everybody, even if you're not used to thinking that that's what Bonnie looks like.